So good morning, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Marketing Demystified. And today I have with me two very special guests, Kunal and Professor Rupal. And I'm joined in this episode with Vikesh Dhani. This entire web series is based on the genesis that there is a marketing which we learn in schools and colleges, and then there is a marketing which is practiced when we join the industry. So we felt that there is a gap and there needs to be a platform where both the experts come together on a platform to discuss and bridge this gap for the benefit of wider audience. And hence this initiative was formed. Let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Harpreet. I had marketing for Kangaroo Group. I have 20 years of experience in marketing. I have worked with various organizations like American Express, HCL, and IBM. And I look forward to an exciting conversation. Vikesh, I will request you to kindly introduce yourself.
Thank you, Harpreet. Hi, everyone. I'm Vikesh Dhani. I'm a publisher and a marketer with about 24 years of experience with some of the finest companies in publishing and information solutions like McGraw-Hill, Pearson, LexisNexis. And now I run my own venture, Oakbridge Publishing. I have worked across various roles in sales and marketing. And I hope you'll love this initiative that both Harpreet and I have brought to you.
Thank you. Professor Rupal, can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Harpreet, and thank you for inviting me for this session. I'm Rupal Sharma. I'm a marketing faculty at the SPJN Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai. And I have now close to 3 decades of work experience, 1/3 of which was in industry, where I was working in brand management roles. And then I switched to academics, and now for more than 20 years, I've been teaching.
Sure, thank you so much and welcome to the show. Kunal, would you be kind enough to please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be on this show, on this platform. My name is Kunal Mehta. I'm the Global Director for Marketing and Communication at DSM. I'm based in Switzerland. I have 18 years of experience across B2B and B2C. Before DSM, I spent many years with Nestle, with Britannia, and with Urban Brands. So I really enjoy getting into the different dimensions of marketing. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Sure. Thank you so much for that introduction, Kunal. So let's get started with the discussion. So topic for today is brand equity, different aspects of brand equity, and what we plan to cover in the entire conversation is what is brand equity, what do we understand by the concept, what is its significance, how brands build and measure brand equity, any framework which is being followed, whether it is from the academia perspective or from the industry perspective, components and importance of brand properties in building brand equity, difference in brand equity when it comes to B2B and B2C space, and the role of content and content strategy in driving brand equity. And last but not the least, what is the impact of brand equity on brand/company valuation? So these are the broader topics around which the conversation will flow. I'll request Professor Rupal to start with the discussion. What do we understand by brand equity as a concept, and what is its significance?
Right. Thank you, Harpreet. And I'll just share, with your permission, a few slides so that viewers can, focus on some of the key points which we are going to discuss today. Right. Sure. So you asked me what is the brand equity concept and what is the significance. So if you look at it theoretically, it's really talking about added value, right? Added value which we can attribute to the brand. Okay. In addition to the attributes of the product or service itself, there is an added value which the brand brings to the table, and that added value component is essentially what we term as equity. It can be looked upon as an asset, which the brand delivers. So brand equity is about associations which the brand has in the consumer's mind. It's about the strength of your brand. And how do we get this strength of the brand? It's a result of marketing investments in the brand over a long period of time, right? So that's equity. And if we look at, let me take a little example here. And if you look at these two pictures on the slide, other than the fact that they both begin with A, what is common between these two, right? If you ask people, generally, everybody knows them. right? And I think both these, if I can say, brands command a lot of respect. There is an element of trust in that, and I think very, very importantly, people love them, right? There are Apple fans who are like passionate advocate about them, and then there are fans of Amitabh Bachchan from all ages, across, and they really love them. And what does that give it? That gives them a very strong equity. It allows this brand to charge a premium. And if they are offering something from their side, people look forward to it and people are willing to experience it and try it, right? And that is equity when I'm talking about equity, really. They're truly unique and command a loyal following. And that's the strength. And how does this strength come about? Right? And what are the aspects when we are looking at brand equity? So there's awareness, wide and strong and deep awareness of the brand. Sorry. Then there are the brand associations, which are built as a result of your marketing strategy and your investments. What is the perceived quality in the consumer's mind? What is the strength of loyalty of your consumers? And that's a very powerful resource for any brand to have. And other proprietary brand assets, which could be your logo, your symbol, particular color schemes, taglines, which you are associated, spokes characters, which are associated with your brand. And this is Acker's framework, essentially, these 5 components of brand equity. Why is it important? Because brands add value to both consumers and to the firm. How do they consumers? Because it helps them to make decisions. It gives them value beyond functional value. It gives them emotional and self-expressive value as well. So when you're buying a brand, you're buying much more than a product. When I'm buying a Mercedes, I'm not just buying a car, right? I'm buying something much more. How does it add value to a firm? Because it helps us get better efficiency out of our marketing spends. It helps us to protect our brand against competition. It helps us to get better value from the market itself, right? It also helps us in terms of forgiveness and advocacy in reaching out to other customers. And of course, our brand extensions will have better chances to get trial, and we may be able to command a premium in the market, right? So I'll pause here for now.
Sure, Kunal, you want to elaborate on this?
Yeah, I think this has been very nicely put and shared by Professor, and I think it's a great way to kind of talk about what is important for marketers. And I think I would say that for every marketer, marketers can come and talk about what they do, their role, their day-to-day life. But if there's one thing that every marketer has to deliver on, that's driving brand equity. Everything gets encompassed in that, whether it's winning market share, whether it's delivering on the sales targets, whether it's getting more consumers to buy more of your product. I think all of that is about driving brand equity. For us, I would say that the outcome is a given, but how do you achieve and how do you reach that outcome? That is where great marketers and great brands differ from the other brands. And I think there is an important element at play here, which is about building your marketing strategy. Every year, annually, and I can talk about myself, I can talk about companies that I work for. Every year, marketers in some of these companies, they spend a significant amount of time putting the marketing strategy together. This is the framework, this is the work that we do. And then the year after and the year after, we start measuring the brand equity. But the marketing strategy starts with some very fundamental questions about what is the current market size? What do we want to do? What is the growth target that we have? What are the target audience that we want to go after? What is really the vision and the ambition of the brand? How are we going to measure ourselves? What is the picture of success really looking like? What are the KPIs that we want to be mindful of? What are the ones that are good to see, but it's not going to shift the needle when it comes to brand equity? So I think the point I want to make here is that brand equity is the result of the work that you do beforehand. And there's a lot of foundational work that brands have to do in terms of all these things, all these questions in framing the marketing strategy. Because if your marketing strategy is sound and it's clear and consistent, brand equity will happen. It's a result. It will happen. So that's the way I see it. And I think happy to go more further into the depth of it. But depending on, let's see what Professor has to say, and I will kind of build on those aspects and talk about how do we take those theoretical frameworks, and then how do we really go and bring that to life within the market. So back to you.
Sure, thanks, Kunal. So if I were to summarize the key takeaways till now, whatever I have understood, brand equity for a layman or for any budding marketer, equity is what is the value which we attach to that brand, right? Equity, in a very simple word, is what is the value which we attach to the brand. And if I go back to Akar's framework, which Professor Mukul was showing to us, it is how connected a person is with the brand, which is brand loyalty. How aware a person is about the brand, which is brand awareness. How does a brand, is the brand synonymous with quality? What is the quality factor which the brand brings to the table? What is the trust factor which the brand brings to the table? And all of these four intangible aspects measured with certain tangible aspects, which is the logo of the brand, the color of the brand, the association with the brand. Like she was very rightly putting across the table those two iconic pictures. One was Amitabh Bachchan and the other was Apple. Just by looking at those two pictures, there is certain association which comes to the mind. So what are the imagery associations with the brand, which ultimately goes on and defining the brand equity? And like Kunal said, that there is a lot of work which needs to go in from a marketer perspective for building that brand equity before the brand is even launched. And post the brand is launched, then there is consistent storytelling which goes behind in getting those imageries in place.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Right. So with this, I think let's again go back to Professor Mukul. So what is the significance of you? I know you touched a little bit when you spoke about that, how brand is important for an organization and how brand is important for a consumer perspective. Can you elaborate more on the significance aspect and how brands build and measure this brand equity?
Okay, I'll do that. And I'm just again going back to sharing my screen with you. So really, when you talk to me about building brand equity, this quotation from Jeff Bezos comes to mind, where he said, a brand is something people talk about you when you're not in the room. It's about everything a brand does, everything a brand represents, to the consumers and to the other stakeholders around you. So, a brand in its marketing communication is only one part, but the products and services offered, the experiences the brand is offering to the consumer, the entire journey, the touch points which the brand has with the consumer, each and every action is contributing towards building your brand equity, right? So I'm going back to my example, Harpreet, here of Amitabh Bachchan and Apple, and say, okay, what makes these brands so strong, right? So is it, the excellence in performance? Yes, of course. Is it the consistency that every time you experience an Amitabh Bachchan performance or every time you buy an Apple product, you are assured that, you are getting what was promised, right? And it happens consistently over the years they have delivered, right? Is it that? Of course it is. And like Harpreet, you yourself said, trust, a very big component. Is it the trust? Yes, all these three. And these are very important foundations of brand equity. But something is even more important, and that is the relationship and the emotional connect which a brand forms with its customers and stakeholders. And these put together really is what the marketer has to focus on when they want to build their brand equity, or when they want to make their brand from good to great, right? So the love and the emotional connect is something which is really, really critical and very important in any brand customer relationship. So what do you aspire for and what do you plan for? You plan for a share of mind, which is really to do with, does the consumer know your brand? What does he or she think about your brand? What is the space you occupy in the consumer's mind? And the associations which we spoke about earlier. And then comes the share of heart, which is really to do with emotions and love and self-expression and connect. And both these, if you do well and you put strategies in place and you implement your plan well, you will get a high share of market, right? So that's the link. And I like to use this framework. It's not a framework, it's just a set of words which I've put together, which I thought simply brings out the steps involved and the key points which are critical for a brand manager to take care of. And that is authenticity, genuineness of what the brand is promising and what the brand stands for, right? And believability, whatever you claim, it has to be backed and it has to be believed. Now, maybe your claim is correct technically, but if it's not true, in the customer's perception, or for some reason don't believe it, it holds no water, right? So believability is very important. How do you communicate that and get the customer buy-in? Consistency of your brand promise and delivery of that brand promise. And that requires a lot of back-end work, as Kunal was mentioning, putting systems and processes in place to make sure that your brand experience is consistent and as per your promise and as per expectations. And then comes desirability. And it's good, it's nice, but is it something, can I evoke a desire in the customer and say, this is what I want and this is the only thing that I want? And of course, experiential excellence, right? Over the journey of the customer and even beyond the purchase, pre-purchase, purchase, post-purchase. The entire experience is something which the brand has to create and nurture and enhance at every step of the way, right? How do we do that? The most important is getting the right insight. If you get the right insight, the other steps will follow. What is it that the customer is missing? What is that one thing which I can leverage to build my brand, right? Cadbury is wanting to build its equity, took on the kuch meetha ho jaye ritual and, ceremony, which we all have, and then leveraged onto that to build a whole lot, right? Huggies as a diaper, figure out that the customers have a resistance to something which they perceive as plastic or non-natural, and people have grown up with cloth nappies at home, and so therefore they associated their brand with, say, it's cloth-like and it absorbs and it's soft, right? So you pick the right insight to say, how do I reach my customer? Find that one big idea which defines your brand, one thing, not 50 things. I mean, your brand may have a lot of benefits which you offer, but what is it that you want the customer or the consumer to most strongly associate you with? Be very, very clear on that. And all the big brands, the brand icons, will have this one central idea which they stand for. Okay. What should that central idea be? It should be meaningful to the consumer. If it's a very great idea, but it doesn't mean anything to the consumer, doesn't solve your problem. It should be differentiated from competition, should give you that element of uniqueness. And like I said earlier, believable and, very importantly, sustainable over the long period. If it's my strength today and tomorrow somebody overtakes it, then a problem is, not solved. Okay. So what should a brand do? A brand should deliver on its promise, fill any value gaps in the customer journey, and provide a seamless brand experience, right? Leverage rituals and stories to nourish the brand, right? The functional aspects and the attributes are good, and by all means share that information. But more importantly, you look at Oreo, that dunk and lick kind of ritual has made people warm to the brand and, connect to it in a way nothing else has. Maggie has leveraged the power of stories with Mary Maggie, where people share stories. Maggie is not just a noodle for anyone in India, right? It's about my college hike. It's about staying up at night in the hostel. It's about my mother making a special dish with a special recipe of Maggie, sharing with me. And sharing those stories, gives the brand additional power, which the consumers are leveraging to it. And in these days of social media, this is even more powerful a tool than it was earlier. Harley-Davidson, another iconic brand which leverages the power of rituals and stories. So keep in mind purpose, beyond what your brand stands for in terms of functionality, what's the larger purpose? Personalization, connecting with each individual consumer, bringing in the local context or culture, leveraging influencers, and creating activity platforms for your brand. Like I spoke about Harley-Davidson, they have a Harley Owners Club, right? You can have the Bonvita quiz, when we were growing up, was a very powerful activity platform, which is there, which builds in consumer engagement, right? And I'll end with this last slide, which is really Keller's brand pyramid, a classic framework in brand building literature, which leverages that you start with brand salience, move on to building brand performance, establishing brand performance and building imagery, building consumer feelings and emotions so that they have positive judgments towards the brand and positive attitude. And the most important, the strong consumer brand resonance, where the consumer is emotionally invested and connected with the brand. So back to you, Harpreet.
Sure. I would like that slide to be displayed once again, Professor.
All right. The last one?
The last one, yes. Well, a couple of thoughts which I had while you were talking through the brand, different frameworks, and how this brand association works, and how do you build the brand equity. It brings a very important aspect, which is the two, three things which came to my mind. One is that you start with the product benefit. You start with the product, then you talk about the functional benefit, then it is the emotional benefit, and then it is the people which comes into the play, which is that consumer insight, right? You know that this is a consumer insight which I am targeting, and then and it also somewhere encompasses the concept of brand positioning. When you talked about that there is one particular ownable space, one particular single idea which you want to be connected with the consumer, right? So you own that space, and through all these, whether it is brand salience, the brand performance and imagery. And if you go a couple of slides back where you spoke about the consistency, the ABCDE framework, where you spoke about the authenticity, then believability, then consistency. So this consistency is where that consistent storytelling comes into place, and desirability is where the loyalty comes into place. So it again somewhere goes back to the Arcus framework. So authenticity is being genuine. So the brand quality, the brand quality comes into play. Believability is that actually the consumer feels that whatever you are saying, he actually isn't, the perception of the consumer is in sync with your perception. And I think there is where the concept of brand positioning comes into play, where we as marketeers want certain things to be perceived by the consumer. But if the consumer does not perceive that what we are trying him to actually believe in, so there is that out of sync experience which comes into play. Then consistency is that you for that brand equity to be established from day one till for the entire consumer lifetime with us as a consumer, you consistently deliver on that. And then obviously because of this, the desirability and the loyalty factor comes into play, which is again something we go back to the Arcos framework. And this entire journey is what builds the brand equity. So
yeah. And if I, sorry, Harpreet, if I can just take a minute more with your permission.
Sure.
While you were talking through this, the brand which just came to mind was Body Shop, which sort of came as all anti-cosmetic brands and saying that all natural ingredients. And the fact that, where they sourced from their ingredients, that they were actually using natural ingredients, a lot of power of the brand came from its authenticity and believability. And the fact that they built a customer experience around it and different elements of the marketing strategy in terms of implementing what they stood for, that they wouldn't use models, that their product bottles were very simple with ingredients detailed out very clearly, that they stood not only for cosmetics, but they stood for social causes, which the brand believed in. And they hired people which were not professional retailers or people from cosmetics industry, but people who believed in the values of the brand, right? And that, I think, made the brand really what it is. So while you were speaking, that example came to mind, so I thought I'll quickly share it.
Sure, thanks. And there was a slide where you spoke about the emotional connect. Now, when you were talking about that, the brand which came to my mind was Paperboat. Paperboat, if you look at their recipes, that Jaljeera, the Aam Panna, it just talks about those lost Indian recipes, which I think all of us have grown up with. These are Indian recipes which our grandparents or our parents used to make at home. And the nostalgia is the emotion which the brand very beautifully plays with to establish that consumer connect. So I think there is that share of the heart thing which comes into play. And the share of the heart eventually led to share of the market. So Kunal, would you like to elaborate how this brand equity is built in industry? So these are very beautiful examples which Professor Rupal gave. Something practical or something out of your own experience, what you have done because you have such an illustrious experience with Nestle and now with DSM. How do you imbibe this brand equity concept, and how do you work on the concept of share of mind, share of heart, share of market? How do you actually build that brand?
Yeah, I must say, first of all, that it's glad to see that the gap or the perceived gap between academia and actual in-market reality is so thin. I'm delighted to see these slides, and also what you spoke about, things like the importance of insight, the importance of a big idea. These are all actual questions that we raise within the organization, within our teams. I've worked on brands where It has always been about that one big idea. I mean, Kit Kat for years, and you can go in any market in any part of the world. It is all about the break, or have a break, have a Kit Kat. The brand doesn't move away from that. The marketers can come and go, but that line, that tagline has been there for more than 60, 70 years across markets. And one thing that I strongly believe, and this is something they've seen on a brand like KitKat, but a few other brands as well, is that as marketers, we're just brand custodians. We're here to build the legacy of the brand. We will come and go. The brands will stay beyond us. And therefore, we play a role in just building that legacy and driving that brand equity. That is something that marketers should always remember, that that's the role that we are playing. And this goes well into this whole idea of, so what is brand equity? Brand equity is sort of, this whole thing about share of mind, share of heart, and then share of market. It is brand love. And this becomes important because brand equity can be measured in two ways: qualitative and quantitative. The qualitative part is a dimension of brand love that consumers and customers show to your brand. So when consumers on their own talk about your brand, when they are consuming your brand and they put it up on social media without the brand asking for it, that's a great example of brand love being manifested into brand equity. Uh, Another example is that there are brands like KitKat being one of them, but many other brands, they sometimes partner with these fashion brands. Let's say KitKat would do something with Zara. They would just take out very simple plain white t-shirt with just the brand logo KitKat on that. Now sometimes you would think, why would anyone want to wear just a brand name like that? And I can tell you, within hours those t-shirts would go off the shelf. Within hours. It just tells you that how important brand equity qualitatively starts becoming important. Quantitatively, of course, there are many ways to do it. Yeah, you measure, you do research, quantitative research to measure where does your brand sit in the entire brand funnel. It's a dream of every marketer to kind of have the funnel becoming wider at the bottom, which is where the advocacy and the loyalty sits in, which is what Professor also mentioned. All brands start at the top of the funnel, which is about driving awareness, but then you keep converting people and you keep moving people down the funnel. And therefore, the ultimate goal is to move them towards the becoming brand advocates or brand loyalists. And that's where the brand equity gets transitioned. Other ways to measure this is, of course, the valuation of your brand. The valuation of your brand is, and this is an important point, the valuation of your brand is not equal to the sales of your brand. Ideally, big iconic brands, the brand equity or the brand valuation is multiple times higher than the actual sales of the brand. When your brand equity or brand valuation is higher than your sales, you know that there is significant potential to grow the market share even further, to penetrate the market even further. On the other hand, when your brand valuation is lower than your actual sales, you also know as a marketer that there is immense work to be done, because at any given point of time, your brand valuation should be higher than your actual sales. That is a way to know that is your brand equity moving in the right direction or not moving in the right direction. And this goes back to what I said earlier, that there are many things therefore that you need to do to ensure that your brand valuation starts becoming higher and higher every year. Things like brand properties. I'm a big believer in terms of brand properties. There are things like, right from logos, the colors, the fonts, jingle, all of these things start playing an important role. And what happens is that, especially for new brands, and this is especially for marketers who are, let's say, working on new brands or new companies, first of all, they don't always think about the importance of brand properties. And secondly, they often get it wrong, in terms of the mix. And there are few watch outs on this when you're building brand properties. I think it's extremely important that you need to be clear that what are those brand properties that you want to choose. You can't choose everything. You cannot have a mascot as well as a jingle as well as a logo. You need to be very mindful of what you're choosing. Second thing is that whatever you build as part of your brand property, it should be protectable. From a legal point of view, you should be able to protect it. Whether you can trademark it or register it, you don't want another brand coming in and, kind of hitting your brand equity just because you didn't protect your brand properties. The third thing is also to kind of think about the cultural aspect. Especially, I can talk about it because I've worked on global brands. It becomes very important that any property that you're building, you start thinking that that property should not create an issue in any market, in any country. Sometimes we've seen logos, colors, even the translations tend to offend certain cultures. And therefore, you have to think this much ahead of time. Because if you start to expand from one market, let's say you launch a brand in India, and then you decide to go and take that into another market, and then you realize that this brand name or this color will start creating and offending a certain community, you have lost an opportunity right there. So you have to be very mindful of, when you're building your brand property, that it has to be, inclusive. It has to be inclusive, and it should be something that works across various markets. What is also important is relatability. You know, we talk about the Parle Ji girl or the Nirma girl or Air India Maharaja. When we speak about Indian mascots, globally, you talk about the Colonel of KFC, the Ronald McDonald of McDonald's. These characters, there is certain warmth to these characters. So right from when you're building these brand properties, how should the eyes look? What should the face look like? Should the face be smiling? What should be the colors and the dress that the person or the mascot should be wearing? All these things start playing an important role. And these are all, you do it only once, but if you do it right, this will play a key role in building the brand equity for years to come. So therefore, I say that the importance of brand properties, people and marketers should not discount. And then what's important is that once you've nailed these brand properties, how do you start being consistent with them? What is the story that you want to, kind of craft out there? A lot of these brand mascots have some very nice backstories, which help in bringing the share of heart for the consumers, because they can start associating with it. It resonates with them. So the storytelling becomes important, and also consistency starts playing a role. None of these brand properties get built just by doing one campaign. You have to go after it campaign after campaign, year after year. Only then consistency starts coming in. And then subconsciously in the minds of consumers and customers, your brand starts coming in much ahead. This is where brand equity starts getting formed. So I think there's a lot of work that has to be done, over the years, for brands to start saying that the brand equity that they drive, it's unparalleled, and it's something that's unique. There's a lot more that I can talk about in terms of the content marketing and all of that, but I think let's just come back to what what are the other dimensions that the professor talks about, and I'm happy to kind of keep building on that to talk about how do we do it in an actual market. So yeah.
Thanks.
If I can just chip in with one more example of a great company that I love for the brand equity that it has, developed over the years, it's Titan. Example of a young new brand, and how it organized what was supposed to be, what was originally an unorganized market, and the Tata brand, it's synonymous with trust, how it leveraged it very effectively to give that experience and that confidence to the buyers, that it continues to be one of the probably one of the most highly valued brands in India.
Yeah, and that's a great example, Vikesh, because that tune, that jingle of Titan, people, they can tell you, they don't need to see an ad. It can be playing in a mall, it could be playing on a radio, and people will be able to tell you that it's a Titan music. And it goes back to the example that Harpreet used on Paperboard. There again, there's nostalgia. So when you hear that tune, there's nostalgia. You have certain moments when you remember seeing that ad, or maybe you bought a Titan. So it's a great example where a brand has leveraged trust of the foundation of Tata's, but also created their own unique brand properties to drive brand equity further.
And then there is another example of the pug, the Hutchison ad, You and I. I used to love those ads as a kid, and I think that pug became very popular post that.
Yeah.
So again, that's the human connect.
Yeah, unfortunately, they used it only for, let's say, a series of campaigns and for a certain period of time. But of course, with the various things that was happening within the company, structural change and ownership change, it was a beautiful brand property, but it lost its way. So it's another example of sometimes you've got something strong, and for various reasons you let it go, and you're remembering it and we remember it, but the brand just didn't take it forward.
Yeah, it was not leveraged properly.
Yeah,
and exactly. There is where that consistency comes into play. So it's not one day story. So they created a very strong property but they did not follow it through, and that is why, like you rightly said, it was a great property. All of us could connect with it, but somewhere it lost its value down the line. So Kunal, there was another thing which you mentioned about that there are certain qualitative and quantitative ways of measuring the brand equity.
Right.
I would like you to expand on the quantitative ways. So is it by certain brand health studies, NPS scores? What are those KPI metrics which you look into as a marketing head? That what are
Yeah.
certain KPIs which you track?
Thank you for watching part 1 of episode 4 on brand equity of Marketing Demystified. In this particular episode, we spoke about different aspects of brand equity, such as what do we understand by brand equity as a concept, what is its significance, what is ARCA's framework, how do we establish great brand equity, is it about products and services, or is it about perception and communication, what makes a brand such as Apple so strong, ABCDE of brand equity: authenticity, believability, consistency, desirability, and experience. How do these factors go a long way in establishing brand equity? Getting the right insight. Why is that important to develop a good brand? How to leverage storytelling to establish brand equity? Understanding Keller's brand pyramid. And when brand valuation is more than sales. So we also looked at brand valuation versus sales. Then what does it mean for the brand and vice versa? How do we measure brand equity in terms of both qualitative aspects and quantitative aspects, and importance of brand properties and how to choose them? If you enjoyed the conversation, do stay tuned in. We will soon be bringing to you the next part of the conversation with both the guests. And in case you liked the concept of this entire episode in Marketing Demystified, please do like, share, and comment, and stay tuned.